One of the example assets and maps inside of this project is the lake water, which we can see here. The primary feature of the lake water is our variation amount. If we move it down to 0, we can see something like where we have just a solid rippling effect on our water surface. If we move it up to 1, it becomes something much more like a solid still surface. And if we were to get something lesser or in between, we can see patches of both still and rippling water. Now the way to accomplish this is inside of our material, we have a section based on a mask, so a random noise. How much of this random noise is going to show up based on a variation amount, and that's the variable we change there. By changing it between 0 and 1, or nothing and all, it drives that information based on a per pixel basis into our lerp, and our lerp has two sections. One on the top, which is our rippling motion we can see here, and one on the bottom, which is our more solid and no motion. And by lerping each pixel based on how much each pixel, or the variation amount, based on how much this mask texture is taken from black to white, or nothing or something, it lerps it into what we can see. It also uses that same information to lerp how rough it is based on how much of a pixel is being shown, whether it is more of the flat surface or more of the rippling surface. Now with this knowledge in mind, we can actually adjust this fairly easy to allow us to determine, instead of a random mask, but a painted mask where we want this flat surface to be. I'm going to go ahead and show you the example I made. This is a lake water using vertex coloring. And we can now see we have the rippling water, except in this one spot where I've painted something to make it look more like an ice flow. And it was fairly easy to do. So if we look at the lake water vertex and we pull out a little bit, we can see we have this large amount of nodes here. But if we compare it to the original one, there's not much difference. Mine pretty much switches out one variable for vertex color and then adds in a secondary color that we're lerping using that vertex color, so we get our nice little ice shader. I've also changed one variable over here, which I'll show you. So how does this work? Inside of our material, in the original one, if we were to look at this section, we have our variation amount that we can change on the blueprint from 0 to 1, or how much of this is going to be used in the lerp. Instead of that, I'm using the vertex color and bringing in the red channel. If we go back to our map and we look at that, we'll go to Modes, Mesh Paint, change the color view to RGB, and now you can see why it looks like an ice flow, because we've painted that red. If we look at this, it's going to now, instead of using that random texture variation, it's going to only paint where we have red and put that into our lerp. And then we're going to go ahead and put that into our lerp for roughness. So now our ice flow looks more rougher rather than shiny. And then we're using that same information, our vertex color, into a lerp between either the water color or our ice flow color. And that's basically it. I looked at the original blueprint here, this material setup, determined how it worked by examining it, replaced a variable that we adjusted the blueprint with a vertex color, which we're allowed to paint in here. You can see I can change this from off. We'll go to paint, red, and if I paint red, you can see I get a nice little set of ice flow. And of course, you can adjust things as needed. It is vertex painting. I'm not really going to cover that here, but you can see how it's really easy to just do what you want. And the nice part is this could be expanded. All I did was change this to start lerping using a vertex color, using the existing setup. If I wanted something else, I have two other channels, green and blue. And we could maybe paint in rougher water rather than this more solid color here, by simply adjusting it from being the wavelet, which is not really very rough, to something that's much rougher, and we'll have rougher water wherever we paint it. And this was just one of those things that I found by examining this asset, determining how it worked, and adjusting it to fit my needs.